Hello and welcome back, friends. Hope you had a great holiday season. Hope your 2020 is off to an awesome start. Now, I've been kicking around an idea, a way for everyone to kind of get involved with the show. And here it is. If you've been involved with BG for very long, chances are you've had an awkward, uncomfortable, or a bad demo somewhere in your territory. And I want to hear about it. What I'd like you to do is send me an email. You can either write it out or you can record an audio or video file and send it to me at smokeandburnpodcast@gmail.com. What I'm going to do is kind of collect these stories. When we've got enough to make a whole show out of it, I'm going to put it all together, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So submit your stories for a chance to be featured on the show, and thanks for listening. Have a good week. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Smoke and Burn. Today I'm joined with Mike Keene of BG, Nebraska, and BG, Minnesota. Kind of got a foot in both states, huh, Mike?
I do, and thank you for having me, Casey.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Mike and I have known each other for a few years. When I joined with BG Products, and they first sent me out into the field, his distributor, Bob Oliver, was nice enough to welcome me in, even though I had no clue what I was doing. And the first person he sticks me with is Mike. So we rode around. You told me a bunch of funny stories. And I think we worked on a PVP program. It was a good time.
We did. It was my first interaction with you, Casey, out in the field, and the feedback I got just because of the different point of view that you had. I remember the debrief on the feedback talking about the value that a used car manager would have versus a service manager, because it was really the first time I had worked at the front end of a dealership like that.
Well, I am full of valuable insight, so
it's obvious.
I should have braced you for it. So, Mike, give me a little rundown on your work history, because if I'm remembering correctly, didn't you start out selling cell phones?
Cell phones. Yeah, I started, it was my first commission job. I was 15 years old. I worked for a little audio video boutique that sold obviously stereos, car stereos. That's what got me into it. Appliances, but they also started to sell cell phones. Dating myself when I tell you this, but I would sell like the Motorola brick phone. I remember the first phone I sold, it was $1,000 for the phone, and it was the Zach Morris brick phone. And the rate plan was $49.99. It included 30 minutes. And if you went over those 30 minutes, it was $1.99 a minute. And that gave you access to a home tower. That home tower gave you maybe a 20 square mile radius. And if you went off that home tower, it was $5.99 to access another tower. And that didn't include your rate plan. So then it was that $1.99 a minute. But there was a market there. And, that first cell phone I sold, I was hooked immediately on commission sales because I made $250 on the phone. And then we got 200% of the rate plan. So $250 on the phone. It was a $50 rate plan. I made $100 on that. It was an amazing time to be a cell phone salesman.
I'm gonna say, if you bought a phone in the 90s, you were getting hosed, mostly by Mike.
If it were possible, if I could talk you into it. But it gave me a free cell phone. So, what other 15-year-old is rolling around with the cell phone? Besides Zach Morris? It was great. I felt like I was the coolest kid on the block.
Just popping around in your Fiesta with your shoulder strap phone.
Oh, G-Body Oldsmobile, buddy. I was cool.
Awesome.
I did that all the way through. I actually continued to sell cell phones while I was in college because, again, the money was easy. And then it got a little bit cheaper. And we were in college. Everybody needed a phone to be able to call long distance to talk to their parents. So I did it all the way through to the point where it moved me, of all places, to Lincoln, Nebraska. And that is actually how I found an entry point into BG. My secretary at the time, her husband was, he worked for Ken's and Leslie. They owned Nebraska back then. And he would come in on lunches. I got to know him pretty well. And one day she knew that I wasn't super happy doing what I was doing. At that point in time, I was managing Eastern Nebraska for Cellular One, which became VoiceStream, which became T-Mobile. So I was managing a whole bunch of retail outlets, and all I was doing was hiring those young kids, just like I was, to come in. I would train them for a year or two. They would leave. It was just a constant revolving door.
Oh, man.
So she knew that that wasn't pleasing me anymore, and Ken's and Leslie had an opening. They had a guy that was actually going to move for them down to Phoenix. And they told me that they would like me to come in. And I remember going into the interview, I was in a suit and tie job. So I went over for lunch, and I went into the warehouse. They had a beautiful warehouse back then, a huge facility. And I'm looking around at the time, I just knew nothing of the industry. I saw a Chimo van and a bunch of cases of pop, or what they looked like to me. I sat in on an interview, and I remember thinking, you think that I can drive around in that vehicle selling these expensive cases of pop and make six figures? You're crazy. I'd like to think I'm a gentleman. So I went through the interview. I believed them, but it just seemed like such a foreign concept to me. I've always been a car guy, not the kind of guy that changes in his oil or drives a Camaro, more like, embarrassingly back in those days, kind of like a racer. Like, I liked a lot of plastic. I thought they were cool. I'm the Celica guy that looks fast. That's all I wanted.
Yeah, that was the thing then. The more plastic, the better.
I was a connoisseur of those vehicles. And so I didn't have a shop. I hadn't lived in town a tremendously long time. And one of the things they encouraged me to do was just go ask a few people, and because I'd never heard of BG again. So I went to 3 or 4 different shops just to check it out. And every single one of them were described to BG as what a wonderful product it was. I think that they could kind of tell that I was maybe interviewing for a job, or they knew that there was an opening, because they'd ask me, are you applying with them? Why are you asking questions about it? And I told him, and every single person I talked to said it's a company that I would work for. So I was offered the job, and I took it, and that started me down this road. That was 17 years ago now.
I've talked about it before. Especially now that I'm in a position where I'm interviewing salesmen and talking to applicants and stuff like that, it's really hard to describe the BG business without sounding like exactly the same pitch as a pyramid scheme.
It does.
It's like you own your own business, and your income potential is unlimited, so long as you're out there making it happen.
Set your own schedule. You do what you need to do.
Oh, it has all the hallmarks of like a South American goji berry drink juice business or something.
Yeah, absolutely. We have an internal joke, because a few of us had looked at a few, you get as a salesman, if your account is into Mona V or whatever it is at the time, you listen to it. I remember listening to one about coffee, and I think a few of us had actually given them some money, and the main pitch was, it's simple, it's easy, it's coffee. And we did it, for about a week. What I ended up with was some really good green tea out of the deal.
Oh, yeah. They're great at selling you the starter pack.
Yep.
Like, there's definitely, at one point, there was a Mary Kay starter pack in our household. And, we struggled to get rid of it.
It's almost like
nothing worse.
Fruitcake gift at Christmas. Like, hey, I think that you'd really enjoy some of this special coffee, and I know you're a coffee connoisseur. Why don't you give it a try?
Oh man, the berry thing was really annoying for a while because it was like you had one guy in every dealership that had gotten hooked on like this berry juice pyramid scheme, and they all wanted to take you to lunch, and you're like, oh, not again.
I've heard it, but I like you, and you have the potential of benefiting me as a BG guy. So I guess we're going to lunch.
Yeah,
And they
exactly.
always want, it's not like they want to take you someplace real nice like Olive Garden, you know. But
I think I scored some chilies out of it.
oh yeah,
Probably got some
Chili's,
Southwest egg
Applebee's.
rolls.
You know, I imagine the twofer at Applebee's is a real popular pyramid pitch place now.
Yeah, if I have to listen to this, I'm at least going to get some barbecue sauce on my polo. You know, man. So, how long have you been with BG then?
So yeah, 17. I think you know, you lose track of it. The other day, I lost track of years in my actual life. I was telling somebody that I was 42. It turns out I'm 44, but I'm pretty sure I'm on 17, working on 18 now. I
In your
started
defense, it changes so often. You know.
yeah, yearly.
Man, that's a long time though. And so you started out as a salesman with Kens and Leslie, and then what's your role now? Give me kind of your title of your position now.
So my title is director of sales. I get to do it in both Nebraska, and then we have the southern half basically of the state of Minnesota. It's not really the half; it's the half population mark. So we go right up to the cities, neighboring Tingle on the north and Rick Beller on the south.
Good old Tingle. Now, for those of you that don't know, and if you're not a distributor, you don't get to see all the reports and stuff like that. But BG Nebraska is an absolute juggernaut. I mean, in terms of like penetration with the cars that you guys have, you do a lot with them, and there's a lot to be said for that. It's a credit to your guys' organization. Nebraska is a little newer to you guys, right?
Nebraska is where we actually had our home base.
I'm,
Bob.
I'm sorry, I meant
Yeah,
to say
Minnesota's newer to us, but yeah, like Nebraska was Ken's and Leslie. Bob, a number of our guys had originally started with K&L, and Bob was lucky enough to be able to purchase it from a well-run organization. So he came in, and I think at that point in time uh, we were about half the size that we are now. So he's taken it. I'm going to say he's had it for about 8 years, and under his leadership, we've been able to basically double, if not more than that, in the last really 6-7 years.
Now, I actually got to spend some time up there. When I first started with BG Corporate, working with some of the sales guys, Robert Oliver, and some of the other guys that you guys had up there. Scott Kraus, he's still with you, right?
Oh yeah, Scott is with us. He was an original hire in Minnesota, and affectionately known as Dr. Kraus ever since.
Oh yeah, that guy's got a brain on him.
He doesn't forget things, and this is the joy of being able to do it with a wide variety of cast and crew members. Scott is one of those guys that will research it through and through. He doesn't want to just know the answer. He wants to know the why. And that's what makes him very special, along with, again, being able to remember all of it.
Yeah, he does have a remarkable memory. He calls me once in a while to ask me a question. I'm like, Scott, I have nothing profound for you. Like I don't have a single bit of information that you don't already possess somewhere in that thing. So now, Minnesota, you kind of give everybody like a little background on the situation that you walked into there, because coming from Nebraska, where you guys had such a stranglehold on the market. Minnesota was a big change for you guys, right?
It was a completely different market. Certainly for me, Bob, I think, had a little bit better idea of what it was going to be because, he's been with BG for, I want to say 25 years at least, if not more. But, he started a market. So he knew what it was like to try to build a name. I did not. I was lucky enough to step into a situation that K&L had been running effectively with I want to say the BG format for a while. They had a name that we could lean against. I never made a cold call in Nebraska or a new call where they not only knew who we were, but they had maybe even a personal story about one of my teammates or one of the guys that had come before me. Stepping into Minnesota was quite a different situation. They had some knowledgeable guys up here, but they weren't run like the atypical distributor of today. They were not commissioned salespeople, so they had a few accounts, but if the office received a call from an account that was maybe 100 miles away, I think a lot of times what they might have done or must have done is just drive out to that account and dropped off that case of transmission kits, made sure they didn't need anything else, and then went back to the office and waited for that next phone call. So
Well, I mean, don't waste time or anything.
that's it. And one of the hallmarks of Bob's distributor, the way that he has run us is we have a daily expectation of making 2 new calls and 2 demo or trainings a week, and it's a minimum. But everything was truly a cold call up here. We would walk into a place and I'd try a variety of different techniques, but eventually you got to let them know that you're with BG, and you'd get that just dumbfounded look from across the counter, and you want to make a relation to it. So yeah, I would refer to Wins or Justice Brothers or Mock, or a lot of times I'd have to get all the way down to Seafoam, which is a local product here, and unfortunately esteemed, or maybe AMSOIL before they'd go, oh, that's what you guys do. And
Those pricks love seafoam.
oh, Minnesotans will live and die by it. That has so many problems for them. It's funny because in Nebraska, I do my best never to downplay our competition. Again, it's one of the hallmarks that I think that really K&L instilled it. Bob almost insists upon it. You don't want to speak poorly of your competition, but Seafoam and Heat, those are a couple products I think most educated technicians will understand. And so I had to learn not to use that as a negative up here, because that's the equivalent of telling somebody their mother's ugly a lot of times.
Right. So somebody in the crowd is invested in seafoam
And seen it work. I mean, it might have been in a 79 Dodge in 1978. Somehow, some way in that new car, it started right up that winter. But they definitely hold it with high esteem. There aren't a lot of shelves or technician benches where you don't still see it. And granted, nowadays it might be a 5 or 10-year-old can, but they're not throwing it away because that's good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always hard to dance around those things that people hold sacred, this goofy product that we know really doesn't have much value. I always try to say, yeah, technology's changed a lot over the years. And I'll tell you this, I work on a lot of old motorcycles. An old motorcycle, Seafoam's not a bad product, if you're working with all over the counter stuff, but ours is more prescription strength, and for today's engines, it's just a more robust chemistry. It's a better way to clean up deposits on today's vehicles.
Prescription strength. You hit on a very good term. It's something I don't know where I've picked it up. It very well could have been you, but it's a great way to really get them to understand what we are and why you may not have seen it on a lot of counters, because a whole lot of the things that we use, you have to be properly trained, because it is prescription strength. I'm an analogy guy, so a lot of times I'll tell them, I've been, maybe out a little bit too late on a night and had to take a few aspirin the next morning. And, I think most Americans are, well, if one's good for you, 2 or 3, that'll knock it out quicker. And so then I try to describe to them that may be the case. And frankly, I have seen people dump in 2 bottles, 3 bottles of Seafoam. But I want to make sure that they're well enough trained and that they wouldn't do that. You dump in 2 or 3 cans of 44K into that motorcycle engine, you're not going to like the results.
Yeah. Go big or go home. That's what Johnny Tsunami said.
That's exactly it. Because if you take 3 or 4 hydrocodones, it can kill you.
Yeah, it's not recommended.
No,
It's actually a common practice right now, but
I'm from the Midwest. The junction of 80 and 35. We like most places here. Opiates are amazing.
right. So you came into this with no automotive background, and I was kind of in the similar boat. Like coming up through the ranks, like what were the things that you found just the most intense? What was the hardest stuff that for you to to step out on a limb and do for the first time?
Anything to do with the equipment outside of the brake and power steering machine. Those were pretty easy. They're pretty easy systems. They're easy to tap into. I guess that's what I'm going to tell you. But the old PF5s, the spigot style machines. I'm sure you got a few of them out in the territories.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
you know, uh, just finding the transmission line is one thing. I learned very early on to carry fives. And the reason I would carry fives is because if I had to do a demo, I'd find that lead tech and I'd give him $5 or $10 to make sure that I didn't make a fool of myself, or to be my Vanna White, for instance, because I can personally tell you more than one instance where I encouraged maybe the wrong line and was helped out by a very nice tech, but I have hooked a PF5 up to a power steering line before and got
Oh
the car
no.
started. As I started to show them and talk to them about the machine and its functionality during the service, I referred to the gauges and I said, you're going to see that a vehicle like this Ford Taurus, I remember it to the day, you're going to run maybe 15, 20 pounds of pressure. And as I pointed down towards the gauges, they were pegged. And I remember, shut it off, shut it off, shut it off. And by the time, unfortunately, it had shut off, those Ford power steering pumps were vented. The caps on the reservoir were vented with almost a needle hole. And before I knew it, it was shooting out of that needle hole like a laser beam straight to the hood of the car. I'm pretty sure I went through all those $5 bills that I carried in the car wash and most of the brake clean that I had on the van to make that right. But
So much pressure it cut a hole in the hood.
yeah, I mean, it was very memorable, I think, for all parties involved. But the thing is if you own those mistakes, those are some of the technicians that I have the absolute best relationships with to this day. And the service manager at that particular location is John McAuliffe, who has now been with our company for about 6 years. And he wouldn't have come to that company or if I would have just embarrassed myself and walked away, put my head down and like, oh, I guess I can't come back here. It bonds you. That the egg on the face will always really create a relationship if you're willing to own the mistake and let them know. The first thing that comes out of my mouth anymore is I'm not a trained technician. I respect the heck out of those guys because they really are, for the most part, doctors anymore. But the difference is the
Oh yeah.
doctor gets multiple tries to get it right. If you have to go back to the doctor because you have an ache in your back, you're not yelling at his manager that this visit's free. A technician has to deal with that, and that is an amazing talent to be able to deal with day in and day out.
Yeah, I literally as last Monday I let a technician spray himself in the face with transmission fluid when I was supposed to be watching him and guiding him through the service. Just emptied the machine, forgot to bleed the pressure, and we go to fill it again. He opens that little valve on the side, and man, it was just a geyser out of that plastic bottle. Hit him right in the head.
It doesn't take much. I always preach the red rain because it doesn't matter how high the roof is in a dealer and in an independent garage. If you have the right situation and open up that big ball valve, that cannon of a funnel will create red rain over easily 2 or 3 bays. And I just end up anymore telling people, if it happens, it'll only happen once because everybody else will start to really pay attention to why that happened.
Yeah, it's like the trans fluid yeet cannon.
That's exactly it. Or, I mean, even if the worst is what I feel bad for the guys that when you're filling it, especially if you're a manual fill, you're letting the air vent out the side, and you just forget to close that ball valve. You get the top one closed, but you forget to close the bottom one, and you have a lake of transmission fluid, because it's amazing. 2-3 quarts when it's taking the path of least resistance right out the side of the machine. It's quite a mess.
Oh, yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point, especially for guys that are coming into this business without automotive experience, without really knowing the machines inside and out. You can't stress enough the value of just falling on the sword when something goes wrong. If you're humble and you take responsibility for a mistake, not only will they let you go, but generally you can twist that into a positive thing.
Almost always. Again, if you're willing to be humble or empathetic, if it didn't happen on your watch, if you can show empathy, it's amazing where that will get you as far as a relationship. And a relationship is everything in our business. I think that it's one of the hallmarks of success. And I remember as I started to really create it, well before I was a resource, but just having that relationship and understanding that, if you're willing to touch everybody in the job, it's one of the things that I really try to get our guys to understand, because you never know. A lube tech today may be a service director tomorrow. And
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I've got personal experiences. It's one of the best things, again, about doing it for a long period of time, because, if you're nice to that guy as he works his way up, I've one of the biggest stores that we have, certainly one of the most successful. It's a Chevy store, and the service manager there, I know he's a service director, excuse me, has seen more success than he ever thought he would. But when I met him 15, 16 years ago, he worked at one of the smallest, dinkiest little independent shops I'd ever seen. It was him, a manager, and a technician. And the only reason there was even a manager is because the manager's dad owned the block, and it was where he stuck his kid. Like, well, I got to employ the guy. I guess he likes cars. I'll let him manage my little service station. But this gentleman now is a service director, and he's successful because he employs the same techniques. I'm going to tell you, he's nice to everyone, but he's nice in his own way. He still lets them have it when they need it.
Right. Well, and there's a lot of those guys out there. The guys that are, that are tough, but they're fair, and there's a certain level of value to that, just being a straight shooter, willing to say when you're wrong, but also willing to hold people accountable when they're wrong. I mean, people respect that.
I agree wholeheartedly. I believe that the truth will always set you free. It's one of the things, again, that the kind of the hallmarks. There's a lot of Bobisms that I think are probably going to come out in this episode. I affectionately call them Bobisms because Bob Oliver, our distributor, is one of the most well-read guys that I've ever met in that sales self-help area. We've talked about it personally, but I really believe in those things, and it's mainly because I've learned so much from Bob, and he's taught himself. I think a lot of the things that he's been a salesman his whole life, and a lot of the concepts that he employs that I really grasp onto. They're not his. He's got a phrase that I know I've used with you multiple times, but that there are no new bones, only old bones restacked. And I really
Yeah.
believe that's sales. Sales have been around for a long time, and there's not really a lot of new concepts in it. There's just new paraphrasing of those old concepts.
Absolutely. Now, I don't think you would disagree. Would you? I consider you. The bit that I've gotten to work with you and see you in the field and stuff like that. I would characterize you as a relationship management expert. I mean, would you say that that's one of your biggest strengths in the field?
I definitely think it's what I use in the field. I have hesitation saying expert because I've met so many people that are better at it than me. But yeah, I truly believe in never really being mean or upsetting someone who can hurt you by doing nothing. It's a hallmark that I use in my life, but it's certainly applicable in our industry because, again, even if we're talking about that lowly lube tech or a porter, um, they can generally hurt you by doing nothing or just general inaction, excuse me, choosing not to do something. I believe that that's a very true statement. And one of the things that it's caused me to look at is if you're willing to accept that to be true, then the flip side of that is most everyone can help you in some small way if they choose to or feel like it. And they generally will feel like it if they have some sort of respect or rapport with you. If they feel like you understand them. And I really try to employ that on a daily basis with all the interactions that I have.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. One of the things that I've talked to my guys about is, if they don't know you, they don't know you. And
Exactly.
if you don't have a personal connection with it, we're a very advisor centric company nowadays. We see them as our front line of defense, rightfully so. But the technicians still play a vital role in our programs. And having techs that are not on board, or maybe they're just kind of willful participants in the program, can really hold you back. You can have great advisors, but if they have to fight the techs every time they recommend something, I
They'll,
mean, you're only going to get so far.
they'll just stop recommending. I'm going to throw another Bobism at you, but, you know, uh, again, coming from not the automotive industry, just this is such a true statement. The people don't care how much you know once they know how much you care.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's just,
Yeah, that sums it up.
yeah, especially with technicians, because in reality, the reason that I love this particular B2B sale is because there's not one person that you don't positively impact in how you go about your job if you're doing it correctly. It's very good for the customer. It saves them money. It makes the advisor money. It makes the technician even more money. And then, whether it's a dealership or independent, it doesn't really matter. It trickles all the way to the top. And once you get to the very top, again, independent owner or dealership principal, a transmission service when priced appropriately, is a very profitable way to take care of your customers.
Absolutely. You told me about a tactic that you use along those same lines. Simple things like birthdays, anniversaries, that kind of stuff. Maybe you can kind of explain, your practice when it comes to those types of things.
I like to have an interaction with people that seems like it flows from a place of deep caring. When I'm talking with my own guys, I try to get them to understand that when you think back to the relationships that mean the absolute most to you, your childhood friends, the people that you would call best when you use the term friend, it doesn't matter if you've spoken to them for or haven't spoken to them for a week, a month, a year, a decade. As things start to happen in your life and you don't get a chance to talk, when you do get a chance to talk, the conversation picks up almost immediately where it left off. And that happens when people think that you really are paying attention to them. And so I do my best, whether it be through social media or, a lot of times just with general interaction. You'll hear things in the shop like, oh, I got to take my wife out. It's our anniversary, or it's my birthday. It's my wife's birthday. And I almost immediately, now that we have pocket computers, I throw it into my calendar and I set up the reminder. If it's a birthday, I set up the reminder for the day. So, it's the same as I tell advisors. If you're going to do something, like call a customer back, tell all of them you're going to call them back at noon and give them that status update, whether you have it or not. So I have a calendar that goes off usually at 11 o'clock. And at 11 o'clock, I'll get the reminder of whose birthday it is. So I don't go to Facebook and just post, because they're going to scroll through it with the 30 other people that posted in that, hour period. But if you call them and let them know, I just want you to know, happy birthday. It's a good day. I hope you're enjoying it. That's one thing. But when you get the things that you're not really expected to wish them a happy version of, like their anniversary, I don't call them on the day of. I'll set that to go off in my alarm a week prior. So what I'll do is my alarm will go off. And for instance, if I find out when your anniversary is, Casey, I'll call you a week before your anniversary. And it's an awkward call when you first start making them, but I'll just say, hey, Casey, I just wanted to give you a call, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be the first to do this, but it's your anniversary in a week. And I just wanted to tell you, I hope you have a real good one. The reaction that you get to that is amazing. And if the first time that somebody said, "Oh my goodness, thank you so much for this call. I completely forgot." That is remarkable. And then they know you care. And then they don't care what you know. Again, it really bonds you to them, and it makes it so that, I think a standard hallmark that everybody understands is people want to do business with people that they like, and that shows them that you really like them. And you can do that in a variety of different ways. We use Cylindris. It's got its own built-in CRM, right? The customer relations management software. And I really try to encourage my guys to, obviously you need to be putting down some of the details so that you can continue to have a conversation the next week or in 2 weeks when you're back in the store, so that you can continue that MOA conversation or that PVP conversation. But you can use the same software to continue to talk about little Susie's softball game. Like, hey, last time I was in a couple weeks ago, I know you were taking off a little bit early so you could get over to your daughter's basketball game. How did that go? Did she play all right? Did you make it to the game? Just those kind of conversations. If you can pick it up where it left off, it makes you much more effective. And then it's not so much the distance or the time between your stops, because I think we all know that if you could stop at an account once a week, it's pretty easy math, right? You're going to see them 52 times a year. But we can't get to all those accounts that often, or we're all not blessed with a small, convenient little territory. Sometimes, it's you can only see them once every couple weeks. You cut your visits in half. Everybody's got those accounts where you only see them maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks, and that's now you're looking at only 16 or 12 times a year. It becomes much more difficult to build that rapport, that relationship when you're doing that. And if you can pick that conversation up exactly where it left off, you're going to really gain more traction in a much quicker rate.
Right. It almost doesn't matter what the detail is or how you express it. The point is that you're taking the time to recognize someone. You're showing them that they're seen and that they're appreciated, and that in and of itself makes an impact. From there forward, you're that guy to them. And a customer that feels that way about you, not only will they want to work with you on the program and stuff, a customer that really likes you and loves you, they may even be willing to do things that aren't in their best interest. Sometimes just to help you.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. You don't know where that small little bit will help. I don't care if it's the lady in the office, that the payroll clerk that's writing checks, or the gatekeeper that maybe does go ahead and go on back and say, hey, I got a guy up here that I think you're going to want to talk to him, because again, those people can really hurt you with inaction, but a small little piece of action, it's amazing what it can or can't do for you.
So switching gears here a little bit. Okay, I know you do a lot of training, and your training goes a lot further than just like, here's what BG does and here's how to talk about it. Let's say you got a brand new advisor, just started at one of your accounts. Manager says, hey, I want you to come in and do some training with this person that just started. Where do you begin with that advisor?
That truly depends upon, I like to ask as many questions as I possibly can up front. The manager is always going to have a better point of view than you on what that advisor can or can't do. So I really like to get as much information from the manager about what they're already doing well, so that I can compliment them along the way. Maybe he's really good with customers, so I'll use that in the training. But any piece of that information that you can get, how long he's been with the company, and then I'll ask a lot of the same questions of the advisor, because a lot of them are misconstrued into what they're already good at, right? But I want to go back almost, if you've got some dedicated listeners. I think a lot of the BG world has really started to use some Sandler training techniques. But, Mike, in one of your previous episodes, Lasazo, discussed the bat triangle, and that information, especially the way that he phrased it, because again, we've discussed this, a lot of times you're hearing a new paraphrased version of what you may have read previously. But I remember going through the first Sandler training book that I had read, and I really skipped right over the bat triangle. I'm like, oh, well, that's simple. I get that. But the way that Mike had phrased it, as after all these years of training, even changed the way that I'm doing it to this day, because I think that generally speaking, all of us are pretty good at helping the attitude, the top of that triangle. And if not, the manager is going to give you an idea of whether he's got it or not. And I find, again, if you'll ask enough questions, a lot of them will tell you, hey, listen, I've got you for 3 hours today. We've got 4 advisors. This one guy isn't going to make it, and it'll almost always relate to the fact that he's got a bad attitude. So I think we all skip over or generally don't have to hit on the attitude. But what I found myself doing all of these years is jumping right over the behavior and going straight to technique, talking to them about how good or amazing the service that we offer through you now is, and all of these benefits that you're probably not even going to be able to regurgitate to your customer, things like TFOUT and oxidation. I found myself, and I knew that if they use that in their pitch to the customer, their word track, that they weren't going to have any success. But I almost wanted them, I suppose, to know how much I know, or that we know as an organization, so that then when I dumbed it down for them a little bit with their technique, that they would jump right into it. But what I found was that they didn't even have the behavior. He talks about it with the inspection, and the way that he phrases getting the control back to the customer has changed a whole lot of what I do. But again, being an analogy guy, I really kind of break it down anymore to this very simple fact. Unless you're fixing broke, for the most part, all you're trying to do is prevent wear. And so I ask them why you change oil, why you rotate tires, why we have to change brake pads, why we have to do things like change belts. And generally speaking, you can get them all to admit that it's just because of wear taking place. And then I talk to them about the fluids that we're dealing with, or the deposits that we're dealing with inside of a motor, and the unnecessary wear that those can create, and how if you'll just simply offer it. I think we all know that if you got your top 10 accounts to offer every one of the services, every time they find the interval to be acceptable, because that's very different across all boards. We would probably all be $1 million salesmen. You know, there's probably a 20% take rate, maybe 15 if they're absolutely horrible at it. But again, just to get them to really understand how valuable wear is, this doesn't work too well at a small little independent where they might not have the best insurance package. But, at a dealership, they almost all have some sort of dental coverage. And nobody likes to go to the dentist. Just like I truly believe most customers don't really like to go to the dealer unless they're buying a car. But when they take it in for service, it's nobody hits that alarm clock first thing in the morning and like, all right, today is oil change day. Just like I hit my alarm and like, all right, going in for my dental cleaning. But the two are very relatable, just like we relate the industries. I think for a long time people have related dentistry and car repair because they are very similar. I've always tried to talk to them about how you ever left the dentist office without that next appointment. It's virtually impossible. I don't understand why we don't do that in our industry, but I really start to talk to them about the dentist work. And if you've got a group of 3, 4, 5 guys or 50 guys, and just show of hands real quick, who here actually does get their teeth cleaned every 6 months? Less than half the people are going to raise their hand, and I try to get them to understand that those are probably the same people that if shown 1 or 2 values of doing some maintenance to their car, they'll probably buy it. And so, you're going to have to understand that you're going to hear no a bunch, but if you'll just offer it and educate a little bit, you're going to hear yes, because I can tell you that everybody that is not blessed far greater than I have has had what I would call major repair done to their mouth, similar to hard part replacement. And if you ignore it long enough, it gets worse and worse and worse. Just like the guy that doesn't shift, or his vehicle doesn't quite shift right between 3rd and 4th gear. If he continues to ignore it, eventually it just won't go into 4th gear, or maybe it won't go into reverse. The same as with dental. If you ignore that small little pain, eventually that cavity is going to get to the point where you're going to have a root canal, and that's terrible. And if that goes long enough, if you're somehow amazingly more capable of dealing with pain than I am, you're going to let it go to the point where they're just going to have to pull that tooth. Now you're talking about complete component replacement. It's super expensive. It's super painful. Nobody wants to deal with it. And I think you can relate and get advisors to understand that, the dentist isn't trying to sell you anything, but after he does do a good cleaning, or his staff does a good cleaning, he's going to come in and just give you a brief rundown of what's going on in your mouth, because it's complicated and you can't see it. If you'll do the exact same thing to your customers, they will value it. And as long as you're not selling it, they're going to be very happy with your results. And, another analogy, but, everybody's got a service guy, whether it be like I like to use HVAC, because I called a few HVAC guys in the first couple homes I owned, and, it's complicated terminology. I don't know anything about it. And I'm always wondering, is that really necessary, or does that need to be that expensive? But, because they don't even give you the option. At least the dealership will ask you for a diag, but if you just call an HVAC guy and he shows up, it's $75 minimum, But once you find a guy that talks to you, that explains things, he's your guy. And I've moved a couple times now, and I still got the same guy. I think that an advisor that's doing their job appropriately can become that guy. And even if you work for a Ford dealer, once you're that guy, you might not only get their F-150, but if, their wife drives a Subaru and their kid drives a Chevy Cavalier, they're still going to bring them to you because you're the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's Mikey B will be happy. He's big on the dental analogies. He uses a lot of the ones that you talked about in BGU. But
Well,
so you it sounds like your first stop with an advisor is just getting them to buy into the idea of maintenance as a whole. And one of the things that I took a lot away from the conversation with Lasuzo too is the behavioral triangle, and I think an aspect of promoting behavior over technique is realizing and communicating to an advisor that no is perfectly okay.
It's why they're not just 100% commission. There's always a guarantee in the advisor position or an hourly rate on the side. You're expected to hear no, and really it's just the point of making sure that the customer is aware that there's an issue, because they're not going to buy what they don't know. And I've run into very few customers. I mean, of course, I like to have this conversation, I guess, before we even go any further with an advisor as I'm training them. 10% of customers will probably buy absolutely anything that comes out of your mouth because they can. They love their car. They trust this place. They've always treated them right, whether you're their guy or you're just the new guy. 10% are going to buy everything. On the opposite side of that, 10% of customers aren't going to buy anything that comes out of your mouth. So really, when we're talking about the training, we're talking about that middle 80%, but that's most. That's 8 out of 10 customers that are coming through your door. And very few of those come in and say, hey, Casey, I've got 30,000 miles. I'm here for my oil change, but I was reading through my manual and I found that there's some other stuff that I need to take care of. Those customers, I wish there were more of them. Don't get me wrong, especially those that own Nissans and Infinitis and Lexuses, where there's an outrageously good maintenance schedule. But they're just not that many of them. And so I talked to an advisor really upfront about the fact that they are an advisor. They're not called service salespeople. They're called advisors, and that's the key part of their job, is to advise a customer so that that customer can make an informed decision, not just a decision. And then I talked to them about how words matter. I know I just keep going off on this, but words truly matter. It doesn't matter if it's a question or a statement, but I noticed it when I stepped into the industry, because there's so many terms and acronyms and abbreviations that we use that even a newer advisor picks up right away, because they're spending 8-10 hours in a shop talking to techs. So like I was standing back, and one of the things I really advise our guys to do is, especially you have to approach somebody when they're approachable. These guys are busy a lot of times, whether it be a manager, an advisor, or a technician, but just kind of pay attention to what they're doing and how they're talking to customers, because you'll hear this a lot. The customer has already had their initiation into a program, whatever it is. Like, hey, Casey, I'm here for my oil change. So the advisor runs them through the rigmarole, yeah, we're going to get that done. We're going to do a safety inspection. We'll let you know the results, blah, blah, blah. So when they come up and let them know the results, a lot of times you'll hear this, hey, Casey, we've got back your inspection. Even if it's a good advisor, they'll, hey, you can see a whole lot of this is green, which is great. But my technician has marked down a couple items. One of them is your tie rod end. I've already checked with parts. I've got one in stock. We can get it done just as we finish up your oil change. It's only going to take a few more minutes. I can get it done for $199. Do you want me to do that today? And you see it in a customer's face. They're just like, should I do this? Do I trust this guy? And really what they heard is it's going to take longer, and now it's going to be $199. I mean, you might as well go up to a customer and say, hey, Casey, we got your inspection back. Tomahawk, aluminum monkeys festering, $199. So what I started to do is I asked my loved ones, what terms do you know? And what I found were there are 5 things that virtually everybody knows on cars. And it's brakes, battery, tires, oil change, and suspension. That's it. And so, a tie rod end is part of the suspension. I like to teach my advisors to put themselves in the role of the customer. You know, let them know, hey, listen, my guy's found. He calls it a tie rod end. You know, he's the pro back there. What it is it's part of your suspension. You know, and I tell the advisors, if you don't know what it does, I guarantee you that tech does. So get him to explain it to you, and get him to explain it to you though as he's talking to his loved one. And when you're going up front, talk to them like it's your loved one, because you'll do it in a completely different form and fashion. I know that this is a Mikey B thing, but you know, if you'll show that empathy and talk to them where you're really kind of explaining the process and what has to happen in order for us to fix your car or maintain it, it's a completely different conversation than though you're talking to a customer. And those are the ones that end up being advisors for life. And, you know, those are the ones that make good money.
Absolutely. Well, and hitting on that note that language matters, advisors fall into the exact same traps that BG guys do, in that they technical terminology and information makes them feel good, and they feel that it legitimizes them to their audience, when in fact it alienates them from them. You know, so it's a good thing to work through with an advisor, you know, and to remember as a BG rep, you need to put it in terms that your audience is familiar with.
Because it's all voluntary on our side. You know, one of the biggest things that I find that we have to overcome is you can be a pretty bad advisor and be successful. I don't think you're overly successful, but you can be successful, and that's because of this real simple equation, and that is people will fix broke, right? I mean, generally speaking, I only have one car. You know, I think most Americans only have one car. So if it's broke, how hard is it to sell a fix for that and get a customer to do it? You know, they have to get it fixed. It's not like they're gonna like, well, I know it came in on a hook. I guess I'm gonna put it on a hook and take it somewhere else because I don't trust you. You know,
right. Nobody's towing it out of there.
Exactly. If as an advisor, you can make sure that that customer understands the real basic fact of, I can get it fixed, they're going to do it. You know, that's one of the things that's led to the massive amount of untrust in our industry. And that's because people end up buying things that they don't even know what they're buying. And it's difficult because, you know, the math equation that I'll write out for them a lot of times is broke times repair. So basically, what you're lucky enough to have break around you as a shop times the repair, which is just parts and service dollars or labor dollars, equals your sales, which generally is, you know, I don't care if you look at that as net, gross, your income, total service revenue if you're a service manager for the shop, you know, total profit if you're the shop owner. A lot of places have made real good money for a good amount of time with just that equation. And what I really try to get them to understand is, I'm not going to change that equation on you. I think I can probably help you with it so that you can capitalize a little bit more. But I want to add one aspect to it, and it's just maintenance. And if you here's another Bobism. If you help enough people get what they want, you will eventually get what you want. And, you know, most people are coming to work every day simply because they want to make money. I mean, I do get some joy out of helping people understand maintenance or fluids, or, you know, that small business consultant side of our role. I do get some enjoyment out of it, some internal satisfaction. But if I wasn't getting paid to do it, you know, I'm not doing it.
Right.
And I think that everybody at the shop is kind of the same way. So if you can get them to understand that basic equation and then throw maintenance in, and, you know, when I say help enough people get what they want so you get what you want, it's not just BG. You know, maintenance is tough to sell across the board. You know, most places aren't telling you how they're killing it on alignments or how they knocked it out of the park with cabin air filters. You know, so
right.
if you can help them with that, and especially, a dealership where a lot of times, they're graded on some of that stuff, and an independent shop, the simple fact that so many independent shops own an alignment machine, that's astounding to me, because I have a real tough time getting them to buy a PF5, for instance, a good quality
Right.
transmission machine for 5, 6, 7,000 bucks, right? But yet, over there in the corner, you got yourself an alignment machine that had to cost 25, 30,000 bucks, and a drive-on rack that was probably the same amount of money. And so I've taken to a lot of times working the math for him. I'm like, okay, shop owner, even if you're the guy that does the alignment, what do you charge for an alignment? Like 99 bucks? So you're over there for 45 minutes to an hour working on that alignment, and you made $99. My PF5 is going to be used just as often, generally speaking, and let's just do the math for you here. We're talking about selling maybe a $250 service. Now, I don't want you to have to do them all, so I'd like for it to generate about an hour of labor. You're going to charge for that. That's going to be, let's say, $100. You're probably going to mark up my stuff and the fluid. I'd hope you're getting 30, 40, 50% margin out of it, or markup at least. So, let's just say you pay that tech $30 an hour. You've got maybe $150 worth of product there. So we're charging $250 for the service. You've got, I'm going to say, $150 in product, maybe $20, $30 in labor. There's 80 bucks right there. And the best part about it is your tech, after he does 2 or 3 of them, can generally get them done in 25 or 30 minutes. So in reality, per hour, it's far more profitable to offer this maintenance service. And you're the one that's having trouble justifying a $6,000 machine? Come on, buddy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
So kind of drawing the conversation here to before we end here. We just closed out 2019. You think you could give me like your biggest victory of 2019, or what you consider to be your biggest win?
we have a large dealer group in Omaha, Nebraska that we did pretty darn good business with from before I started. And they, for whatever reason, were pressured enough by the manufacturer to pull out of maintenance, not entirely, but 95% of it. A few of their dealers just stopped doing it as a whole to try to cater to the group principle. And we have been working on getting them back. I would say we lost the business probably about 8 years ago now. And from that very day, we started to try to really work to get that business back. And slowly but steadily, we had built enough relationship with the service managers that unfortunately attrition occurs. So we lost a number of our mainstays in that organization. And for 8 years, we have been working hard. About 3 years ago, they finally appointed a true fixed ops director who was a huge fan of Mach. He came out of Chicago. He had success with them, trusted them, built a relationship with them. The moment that he could, he brought in some Mach equipment, and they were flying in a rep from Chicago. We didn't have a Mach representative in the area. It was a defeatist moment. But we just didn't stop. I have a couple real dedicated guys that continued to create a groundswell movement with their service team. As a team, we were really working on gathering and getting the account back in any form or fashion that we could. I found myself using terms like, we're customizable and flexible. We will do this so that it fits your goals, not ours. Just to try to get anything. I would have taken a can of 44K if I could have got it. But about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we started to get a number of the accounts back. It was almost a test. They've got, I think, 24 stores, one or two in your area, and
Oh, these guys. Okay,
yes.
I know who you're talking about.
And so we very carefully and thoroughly went over what their expectations were, what they were really after, and he did not necessarily agree with the group's principle. He's a maintenance guy, understands how beneficial it could be for customers. What we really started to do is we had a bunch of success around them, to the point where I remember the moment where it actually broke free for us. They had offered one of their Audi customers a walnut blast to deal with the massive amount of carbon that had built up on his GDI'd motor, and the customer was upset at the fact that they only had a $1,500 solution to what he didn't feel was a very big problem. He ended up visiting a tire store and told him his problem as he was buying tires. They offered a BG air induction, and it solved the customer's problem. No more drivability issue.
Oh man.
Acceleration powering came back, and we weren't lucky enough for the customer to go back into the dealer and explain what had happened, but the small independent that had the victory was proud enough of it and had a good enough relationship with one of our guys that he told him exactly what happened. We took that information straight over to that fixed ops director, and he used it to help gain a little bit more credibility and value with our product, and with the dealer principal, saw the value of BG, and we didn't lose anything to mock. We got that particular dealer. We started to land a few of the others, and their baby, this particular dealer principal, sits on the board for Toyota's fixed operations team nationally. So for us to finally work our way deep enough into that organization, we just launched their 2 Toyota stores, which are his babies, and did it with the complete buy-in and satisfaction of the entire team. That is the biggest victory that we had in 2019. But the best part about it was a true shared victory. It took a whole lot of staff, and not just the guys that got the accounts. The independent rep, all the way through our entire team, played a role in that, and to have, because at BG Nebraska and Minnesota, we truly value and Bob has instilled a level of teamwork in us that I have rarely seen in other organizations, and that kind of victory with that kind of teamwork was just hugely impactful to us all, and it's one that I'll hold close for a while, because it's a combination of really, all 11 of us working as a group, and doing it across a broad spectrum to get that particular victory, and that I think we all shared as a team, and we're going to continue to capitalize on it, because I can tell you in the short amount of time that we've had it, they've already started to become I would say they're probably fastly approaching our top 10 as a distributor.
Wow.
And that's going to be each one of those stores. So it was great.
Dude, that's fantastic. That's a hard-fought victory. Everybody had a hand in it. And it's funny how those stores that are the hardest to get are generally the best customers in the end,
Almost always, all the way down to the hardest techs. Once you finally get that one, hard old technician that there's no way your fuel system cleaner is going to be able to deal with the problems that I have to, that they're just non-believers. But once you finally win that victory, once the customer service matches the quality of the chemistry, and the technician or the advisor, whoever it is, sees that, they are they're with you for life at that point in time. They're the ones that are like, hey, I've got a couple family members coming in for Thanksgiving, and I want to get some of these BG services done to their car. That when you get that kind of buy-in, that's just those are the ones that you cherish, and those are the ones again that you're going to have for the rest of your career.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, thanks so much for being here, man. I really appreciate your perspective on on those things. And dude, I wish you the best of luck in 2020. Hope you have a big year.
Casey, I appreciate it tremendously. I think we all will. 2020 for our organizations has been deemed the year of great, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome, man. Well, it's been good talking to you. I'll talk to you later.
You bet. Thanks again, Casey.